Abraham Lincoln warned that the philosophy of the schoolroom in one generation will be the philosophy of government in the next. Would you like to know what's being taught in today's classrooms? Welcome to Say What? With attorney Mark Schneider and Pastor George Rosca Jr. They'll explore the issues facing children, parents, and society as a result of the public schools and the forces behind them. Say What is the radio program of Protect Our Kids, which seeks to inform and equip concerned citizens about the looming crisis in American education. So listen in as your hosts, Mark Schneider and George Rosca Jr., unpack the issues and organizations affecting our children. And now here's your hosts, Mark Schneider and George Rosca Jr.
Hello everyone, I'm George Rosca.
And I'm Mark Schneider.
And we want to welcome you to today's episode 156 of Say What, where we talk about the threats to our children in the public school system, including how citizens can push back against those threats through the legislative process.
That's right, George. You know, many parents feel completely powerless to fight back against the forces at work against their kids in the public school system. And even if you're not a parent of a K through 12 aged child, sometimes you just feel like, what can I do about the onslaught of evil that's happening in our public school system today? Well, we're going to share, I think, what is some good news, at least in California. And to start off this conversation, we should probably talk a little bit about the legislative process, because so much evil that comes to the public school system, unfortunately, George, is done through our state and county legislatures. In California, as you know, we've talked so many times about decades of laws that are passed by progressive legislatures harming our kids in the public school system. And parents figure out, you know, particularly if they're conservative, they tend to be in the minority in the states that they live in. And so they lose virtually every election. And these nefarious laws just go on and on and on. Well, there is some good news, because California and 25 other states have what is called the initiative process, which means that they don't have to rely completely on their state legislatures to pass laws that are actually beneficial to children in the public school system. If they can gain enough signatures, then they can mount their own initiative that, if passed by the voters in that particular state, that becomes the law of the land. And so we wanted to talk about that today, because there is a particular initiative now that hopefully will be on the ballot this year in California in 2024, that if it's passed, this is going to change the entire educational landscape, at least with respect to critical theory and how it's taught in the public school system. And the organization that we're talking about sounds very similar to Protect Our Kids. In fact, many people confuse our two organizations, because while we're known as Protect Our Kids and we have sort of a national focus, there's another organization out there that we are very friendly with, and it's called ProtectKidsCalifornia.com. That's the name of their organization. And we've got some friends in that organization, don't we?
Yes, we do. And in fact, Erin Friday is one of the leaders there. She's actually a licensed California attorney for over 25 years. Interestingly enough, she's a lifelong Democrat.
She's a Democrat, yeah.
And I think the thing that changed her mind around was having a very horrible experience. Her daughter, who used to believe that she was a boy, and we'll probably talk a little bit more about her experience there, but what the hell she had to go through with the school system and with everything else. So I guess the schools chose to pick on the wrong mom when it came to that. But she also co-leads the Western region of Our Duty, which is an international organization which brings together parents and allies who are fighting to protect children and also vulnerable adults against this whole gender ideology nonsense.
Yeah, so Erin is one of several prominent people in this organization, ProtectKidsCalifornia.com, that put their heads together along with other partner organizations like ours to come up with language that has been very well vetted and that has frankly been modeled after other policies in other states. But this one goes even further, I think, in protecting children in the public school system. And if this initiative gathers enough signatures, and that's why we wanted to bring it to the attention of our audience today, because, George, the clock is running, and I think they need to gather over 500,000 signatures to make sure it's on the ballot in November by sometime in May. So it's coming up very quickly. So listeners, please pay attention very closely to what we have to say today and make sure you take action at the conclusion of our program. So let's get into the details of what this initiative would do. And it basically does three things. It gives parent notification of things that are happening with their children in the public school system that parents are going to want to know about. It protects girls' sports.
This is a big one.
From boys identifying as girls that have very slowly, well, not so slowly, have sort of taken over girls' sports. And number three, it protects children against gender indoctrination and so-called gender-affirming care. Each one of these things would be worth the initiative itself. These are huge benefits to our kids. So let's talk about each one of these in a little more detail, starting with the first one, parent notification. So again, George, as we've talked about on this program many times, as you well know, and our audience should know by this time because we've brought this up many times before, school districts across California, not just our state, but other states as well, are passing what are known as parental secrecy policies. So these come into play usually when a child has come out as a homosexual, or even more prominently when a child starts identifying with a gender that's not their biological sex. And usually the parent doesn't know anything about this. Mm-hmm. I mean, the amount of peer pressure that's applied to kids to come out as something other than, quote, binary is just tremendous. In fact, both Gallup and UCLA have done studies now that shows the effect of what's been happening in the schools for years now. Between 1 in 3 and in 1 in 4 adolescents now identify as a gender different from their biology. You can't make this stuff up, George. It's just astonishing. Well, schools now are working part and parcel to encourage and to promote and to advance that non-binary gender identification. And they do so by putting together policies meant to hide what the child is experiencing from its own parents. And these have been subject to litigation because on the other side of this now, school districts are passing what they call parental notification policies. And these are designed to combat these parental secrecy policies. And of course, as we know in California, our own Attorney General, Rob Bonta, has filed lawsuits against, I think, at least 7 school districts in the state now that have passed these parental notification policies. So there's a war going on between school districts that want to keep parents in the dark and school districts that actually want to do something right. Well, this initiative, if passed, would make parental notification a permanent feature of California law.
Yeah, and Mark, the other side always comes out with they have their slogans that they chant, because they say that we hide behind, parental rights. Everything we do, we hide behind that slogan. So on this particular point, they always say, well, you're forcing the outing of a student. And it's like, what do you mean we're forcing the outing of a student? These are all topics that should not be in the possession and control of the school and its officials. These are topics that belong in the family to be addressed there. Whatever the child's going through, those topics need to be addressed in the family. No different than what we've mentioned in the past. Common sense things like, can a school give your child a Tylenol? No, they can't. The parent needs to sign a release form for something like that to happen. But can the child go to Planned Parenthood and have an abortion? Can the child go off campus and go to Planned Parenthood nowadays and even start hormonal treatment? Yes, they can without the parent knowing it. And then on top of that, Mark, as you've mentioned in one of the episodes, the parent will get the bill And that's the only time they'll find out.
Yeah, that was a law that was passed by progressive California legislatures, I believe in 2021, that requires insurance companies to actually hide gender-affirming care medical procedures being done on minor children. So the first exposure that parents get is when the bill shows up in the mail. I mean, it's just unbelievable. But George, I'm glad you brought up the medical component of this, because more and more school districts are now putting in place what are called school-based health clinics. So this is something new in American culture. Schools have been places traditionally of learning. Now, even when you and I were growing up, yeah, there was a nurse at school or some kind of medical practitioner. So if you got into a scuffle or fell down or had some injury, you would go to the nurse's office and they might give you a Band-Aid or a Tylenol. If they got parents' permission, they would call the parents and let the parents know that, Johnny had a mishap and we just want to make you aware of this. But medical attention for a child was in the parents' province, not the schools. That has changed dramatically. Schools are becoming more and more sort of a community catch-all area, including health services, again, away from parents. These clinics are providing contraceptives, counseling, both psychological and psychiatric. There are non-licensed, quote, professionals providing psychological counseling for children. In fact, in the San Lorenzo high school-based health center, according to a post on X, they offer students gender-affirming care, including, now this is a school health-based health center, chest binders. What is a chest binder?
Say what?
This is a device that is attached to a young woman who all of a sudden is identifying as a boy, to hide her maturing breasts, to flatten them out. What is a school health clinic doing giving these kinds of devices out? Moreover, hidden from parents. Shapewear. I'd never heard this term before, but you get the idea of what that is. Information and counseling about transitioning. Quote, gender-affirming hormone therapy and other types of medical transitioning services, quote, and more, all being offered by the San Lorenzo High School-based health center.
And Mark, for parents out there, we're not going to get into the weeds right now, but if you just go and do some research on your own on community schools or schools that focus on the whole child, this is the kind of stuff that they want to bring in. They want to bring those health clinics in. They want to bring in the psychiatric and psychological care in. So there is a whole new model of how we want to do schooling in America that the teachers union is pushing. So Google whole child, whole school, whole community schools. You'll see how all of that plan comes together.
And just by way of reminder, these gender-affirming hormone therapies, they include non-FDA approved drugs for stopping the adolescent process, for stopping what naturally happens to children. And these are drugs that originally were approved by the FDA for other purposes that are now being applied to children for these purposes, and they result in permanent sterilization. And then testosterone and estrogen are cross-sex hormones that are being given to these kids. Again, not approved for gender transitioning, and yet schools are now offering these kinds of services to children. This initiative statute would completely roll that back. You would not see that happening anymore. This is huge, George. The Supreme Court has consistently ruled that parents still have the fundamental right to control the upbringing of their children, including what medical procedures they take advantage of. That goes back to 1923 and as late as 2000 in the case of Troxel versus Granville, which stated that the 14th Amendment interest of parents is perhaps the oldest fundamental liberty interest recognized by this court. George, it's time school districts were reminded of this, and this initiative statute would do just that.
They definitely do. Now, this also would repeal AB 1266, right, which is now Ed Code 221.5, which allows biological boys access to girls' bathrooms, locker rooms, and showers. And parents, I mean, this is something that is plastered all over your parent handbook. When you sign up, enroll your child to any, public school, it's there. It basically says that a child, regardless of gender, can use whatever facility they want. I mean, that's very scary.
This is, I think this law was passed in 2019. So this has been the law for quite some time, maybe
2013.
That's right.
Bill.
The bathroom bill, AB 1266. So this has been going on for over a decade now, where young women cannot feel comfortable going into a restroom thinking that they're going to be accosted by someone who identifies as the opposite sex.
And most parents have no clue.
They don't. They still don't.
They still don't. Even today. I ask parents, they don't know. It's just absolutely nuts. Now, this initiative would also define boys and girls according to their genetic and biological realities. Oh my goodness.
You wouldn't think we would need this, would you? Because these definitions already exist. But we've talked about the language wars and the redefinition of what terms mean, done by woke progressive legislatures and school districts. This would change the definition of male as applied to schools to mean a person whose body is developed for the production of small gametes, which is male reproductive cells, whether or not sperm is produced. Male humans typically have a penis at birth and XY chromosomes. Boys and men mean the same as males.
Oh my goodness.
You wouldn't think we'd need to define this in law, but we do now. And females mean a person whose body is developed for production of large gametes, meaning female reproductive cells, whether or not eggs are produced. Female humans typically have a vagina at birth and XX chromosomes. Girls and women mean the same as females. So this initiative, George, would bring common sense back to what male and females are and how they're treated on school campus and what parents should know about.
Reading this definition, it reminds me of just a couple of weeks ago, I was on X scrolling through and I stumbled over Richard Dawkins' account. He's an evolutionary biologist. I mean, world renowned, right? And he's arguing with people on there, because he made a post about, what a biological male is, what a biological female is. And just, the crazy loonies coming out of the woodwork against him. How can he say that? He's transphobic. He's this, he's that. But yeah, I don't think he ever thought that in his lifetime he would have to argue what biology is when it comes to male and females.
Well, Richard Dawkins, he's an evolutionary biologist. He's an atheist. And I think now he's becoming the victim of his own worldview, his own ideology.
He is.
Because when God is gone, everything is possible. People's views are more about power than they are common sense or reason. And he is facing that. Well, George, this bill does something else that we've spoken about, doesn't it? It protects girls' sports.
Yes, this would prohibit biological males who identify as girls from competing in girls' sports in school settings. We've talked about this a lot, especially with Title IX. We've given the history, so just go back to some of our previous episodes. But again, super common sense. We all know that it's unfair to have biological boys competing in biological girls' sports. There was a reason why 1973 or 1972, when Title X was established, why that generation thought through all of this stuff. And we've seen it most recently with a very popular young lady, Riley Gaines, and how she lost her trophy to a man. And so it's just absolutely crazy. In fact, Joe Rogan had her recently on his podcast. And what was amazing is I think in one of her last races when she raced against Leah Thomas, they were tied. They hit the wall at the same time, which is sad for this man, right? That means he's not good at all at swimming. And when it came time for the judge to determine, well, how am I going to give out this trophy, right? The judge gave it to the man instead of to her. We can only give it to one person.
There was a congressional testimony recently that I happened to watch where one of the conferees was showing a video of many women in different sports being injured by biological males who are identifying as females in soccer, in basketball, in cricket, in other sports. I mean, pretty severe injuries. So this isn't hypothetical, George. Not only are girls losing trophies, as if, that was the most important thing, they're also losing academic opportunities because they're not doing as well in girls' sports. This is affecting their entire lives. And now physical injury on top of that. This initiative would put full stop to that process.
Well, and not just that, but, girls, when they do, well against other girls, right, they're competing for scholarships.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, a boy comes in there, takes away all their academic opportunity too, to get into colleges. So
and now this biological boy gets a scholarship for ostensibly a female sport when he's a biological male.
Exactly.
This is a travesty. This initiative would put a stop to that. And finally, George, number 3, it would finally protect kids in California from sterilization and mutilation. It would prevent the sexual sterilization of children by prohibiting the use of puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and genital mutilation surgeries on minors. Now, if a parent decides, they're fully on board with a child's non-biological gender identity, the parents can step in and do something about this. But this would put a stop to this for minors. If this is something an adult wants to do, have at it. Adults can make these decisions on their own dime, unless insurance companies decide to cover it, which many now are. This should not be a procedure that's done on minors. This initiative would stop that process.
Yes.
Now, George, we need to mention something else, because when you go and you download this initiative from the website, which we're going to give you, the Secretary of State in California has the power to actually give a title to this initiative statute, all initiative statutes, and provide the descriptor. And we've seen this time and time again. When initiatives come out that the powers that be in the state don't like, they give it a very deceptive title. And the same is true in this case. Here's the title of this initiative: Restricts Rights of Transgender Youth Initiative. That's the title that they've given it.
What?
Yeah, that's right. So beware when you see that. But actually, this is a very, very good thing for parents. And again, the statute needs about 547,000 certified signatures. So actually, they should probably get twice that number to make sure that they have enough, because these signatures obviously are going to be vetted to make sure that it goes on the November ballot.
Well, Mark, I think we're just about to wrap up here for this episode, but where can parents go and find out more information about this?
So again, the organization that's behind this is protectourkidscalifornia.com, and that's where you go to
and it's
get
just
a copy of it.
ca.com for California.
This is all one word, protectkidscalifornia.com. And make sure that you read the directions very carefully, because there are some new laws that have been passed with regards to signing these initiative statutes. And if you don't do it carefully enough, they're going to throw it out. So make sure you follow the process.
Yeah, they'll try to find any little thing to toss out your signature.
That's right.
Well, parents, this is such a great opportunity for us here in California to get involved, engaged, and do something about the craziness. And in fact, I think this cycle should be easier because the amount of signatures we need to get is based on the turnout of the last gubernatorial election, right? And there was a pretty low turnout, which significantly reduced the amount of signatures we need. If this would have been 4 years ago, I think we would have needed close to like 875,000 signatures. So please, let's get out there. Let's sign this petition. Let's get it on the ballot. And then we need to convince and inform the rest of the general public. So for more information about Protect Our Kids, please visit our website at protectourkidsnow.org. You can follow Mark and I on this podcast. You can go to our YouTube channel, go to most social media places where we're at, Facebook, Instagram, X. And we look forward to talking to you next time on Say What?
You've been listening to Say What, the radio ministry of Protect Our Kids, where they seek to inform and equip concerned citizens about the crisis in American public education and the forces working against our children. Join us at this same time every Saturday as attorney Mark Schneider and Pastor George Rosca Jr. unpack the issues so that we can better safeguard our nation's children. And join Mark and George right here next week at this same time for another episode of Say What.